Um, I mentioned a lot of things going on this weekend, and I'm just so impressed, and I know you are too, about God's relevant word, how this book was written, Genesis, I'm referring to, 4,000 years ago, roughly. A guy named Moses, and obviously it goes back even further with its topical stuff. And under the inspiration of this Spirit, Moses was able to write down for us what happened before Moses was on the scene. But this is 4,000 years ago, and Genesis chapter 8 is as relevant as yesterday's headline. And I'm going to be talking about that today, but in my Bible, there's a little introduction to the book of Genesis, and it says, although Genesis is, strictly speaking, not a scientific document, only divine inspiration can account for its modern accuracy from a pre-scientific age. And if you listen to the pundits and the unbelievers around, in whether it's academia or it's just political world or in our social and cultural experience, the Word of God is kind of, that was for then, and it's kind of passé. It's a bunch of myth, and it's a bunch of this and a bunch of that. I'm going to show you today where this precious promise in chapter 8, it's part of the Noahic covenant, and this is post-flood, but it's going to tell us something that has to do literally with what's going on right now in Egypt this weekend. And our president is over there. This is a picture from Veterans Day, Friday, November 11th. But he's speaking at this COP27 climate summit. And, they're going over there to save the planet. And aren't we glad they're on duty? But I want to say to you that God has already promised us in a number of places, but one of them is going to be right here in Genesis chapter 8. The planet is His, and He's going to take care of it, and He doesn't need anybody's help. What's really going on over there is deception and subterfuge and greed and hypocrisy. I was on the non-mainstream media. I noticed this weekend that going over there to this climate summit, there were 400 private jets that delivered the people to these. So their carbon footprint is pretty large, but they want you to buy a $40,000 electric car by 2030. So in 2008, candidate Obama said coal-fired power plants would be bankrupt. His goal was to shut down the coal industry. President Biden has famously repeated that, especially even in the face of the primary, the midterm elections in Pennsylvania, which is a coal state. We're going to shut down fossil fuel industries. That's their goal. During this election period, no one is building new coal plants because they can't rely on it, even if they have all the coal guaranteed for the rest of their existence. Even if they have God has abundantly supplied energy, especially in the United States of America, and we are squandering His blessings, and it's deliberate, folks. And just to show you that I'm not just picking on Democrats, the likelihood of any real world progress towards this UN, the IPCC is the International Panel on Climate Change. Government aims for meaningful emissions reductions. It's indicated by the fact that since 1990, the world's emissions have increased by 65%. That's after they took on this goal of saving the planet and reducing emissions and all that stuff. It's actually going up. Why? Because they're actually powerless to compel other nations to comply with these emissions. What they're doing is going to unilaterally make America do it. And it's not going to increase our safety, but it will decrease our prosperity. And to show you that I'm an equal opportunity basher here, this is President Bush, 1992. Those who think we are powerless to do anything about the greenhouse effect forget about the White House effect. These people, and his background is fossil fuels, right? That's George Bush. He was an oil guy. But somewhere along the line, they bought the line that carbon emissions are killing us. And the sky is falling, and the world is coming to an end. And God says just the opposite in chapter 8. There's been a hysteria for a long time. Way back in 1895, the New York Times reported geologists think the world will be frozen. So not global warming, but a new ice age. 1932, melting polar ice caps to raise the level of seas and flood the continent. 1958, the coming ice age, Harper's Magazine. 1975, the central fact is that after 3/4 of a century of extraordinarily mild conditions, the Earth's climate seems to be cooling down. So these are articles responding to or reporting the scientific community, the beliefs of their day. And obviously, they're all over the map, literally. But now they want us to trust the scientists now, because these scientists know what they're talking about. These scientists have our best interests at heart, and these scientists will be able to save the planet. That's not their job. This planet belongs to God, and He will protect it, and He will destroy it when it's His time, no matter what humans do. In his documentary, Inconvenient Truth, Al Gore said, unless we take drastic measures to reduce greenhouse gases, the world will reach a point of no return in a decade. He said this in 2006. He said by 2016, it's all over. We will not be able to reverse it. So we should thank him for not only inventing the internet, he also invented global warming, evidently. What are the assumptions here? The Earth's climate is nearing catastrophic levels of warmth because of certain human behaviors. Is that true? What we need to find out, are these guys, are they on the right track, and do they have a solution to the supposed problem? Their computer models accurately predict even up to 100 years in advance what the Earth's climate will be like. I noticed recently one of the hurricanes where they had 14 models of the direction that the hurricane was going to attack Florida. And it actually, with all this data, it actually ended up hitting not the east coast of Florida, but the west coast. And they had almost 2 weeks of data available to them that was right there on the scene, and these computer models missed it by hundreds of miles. So the idea that you can predict what the climate is going to be like 100 years in advance because of the computer models, they're based on assumptions, and they're actually manipulated. Increase in CO2 levels precede the rise in global temperatures. Why is that part of their mantra? Because they want you to believe that you warming your house with coal and driving a car with gas is destroying the planet and the time is up. And so they're saying there's obviously the temperatures are rising and it's your fault. If we eliminate just one behavior, the use of fossil fuels, we can prevent the climate from warming for as long as we like. When it comes to climate change, the media, politicians, and other prominent voices have declared that the science is settled. Haven't we heard that before? Haven't we heard that with vaccinations? We know what the science is, so anybody raising questions about the voting process or about vaccinations or about global warming, they shout you down, they kick you off of social media, they tell you to shut up, they pull your credentials, they will not renew your license to practice medicine or whatever it is, and they want us to trust them. Well, I, for one, don't. Wouldn't it be helpful to have God's word weigh in on such an important topic? Boy, God, could you just tell us about this global warming? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because in Genesis chapter 8, God is going to tell us. First of all, we're gonna have God revealing facts or telling Noah some things. It's interesting that God speaks here to Noah in chapter 8 after a whole year. We don't have any record of God speaking to Noah after he told him to get on the ark. And a lot of cataclysmic stuff has gone on during that year, and God did not speak to Noah. But here we have him in verse 1. God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark. And God caused the wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. So first of all, God caused the storm. God caused the judgment. God brought all this cataclysmic destruction of the entire human race except for 8 people. And now it says God caused the wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. He also stopped the fountains, verse 2, of the deep, and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky was restrained. And the water receded steadily from the earth, and at the end of 150 days, there's a chronology again on the back of your notes there, if you have the green sheet that I've been putting in here for a couple of weeks. There's a lot of people are falsely conclude, well, 40 days and 40 nights, and then it was over, and he got off the boat. He was floating around for a complete solar year. If you use the lunar calendar, which was the Hebrew practice, 30 days for each month, he was there for a year and 11 days, floating around. And then God caused the storm to stop. And when I say storm, it was much more than that. And then he started to dry up the land. Verse 4, and in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. And the water decreased steadily until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the first day of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible. So God is acting here. He's remembering Noah. As I said last week, it's not that he kind of forgot there's some guy down there floating around. He is going to re-engage with Noah. He's going to reveal some things here. He's going to act on Noah's behalf, and he's going to start rebuilding and regenerating earth as we know it today. And notice how specific the 7th month, the 17th day, and then the 10th month and the first day of the month. And he's going to keep doing that all the way through here, giving specific days and times and chronology. So the fact is that God caused the wind to come and dry it. And then how did Noah respond? In verse 6, then it came about at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. And he sent out a raven, and it flew here and there until the water was dried up from the earth. And then he sent out a dove from him. Now, I think the raven went out first, didn't come back, because why? Ravens can eat roadkill, basically. There was a lot of carcasses, as you can imagine, out there floating around. And they went out and were able to, it's a single raven, went out and was able to find sustenance and a place to land. And then in verse 8, he sent out a dove from him to see if the water was abated from the face of the land. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot, so she came back. Because doves won't eat roadkill, carnage. And then he put out his hand and took her and brought her back into the ark to himself. So he waited yet another 7 days. So as God is now starting to remove the water, and in fact, incredibly cataclysmic stuff going on here with this water drainage, a new water cycle was gradually established. There's runoff, there's collection, there's evaporation, there's condensation. So we see the water cycle going on. And that's how God drained off the water and channeled it away. And now we see Noah responding to that. The very first clause of verse 13, there's a fact given to us again. Now it came about in the 601st year, in the first month, on the first of the month, the water was dried up from the earth. 601st year is referring to Noah's age. The flood came when he was 600, and then in the 601st year, it's receded. Then also in part B here, Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the surface of the ground was dried up. So evidently this isn't the same as the window that he had already let the birds fly out of. Now there's a covering. I don't think it's the whole roof of the ark, but there's some way that allowed him to survey the ground a little bit better. And then verse 14, and again, precise days, and in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry. So God, now that's not a contradiction, by the way. In verse 13, it says the surface of the ground was dried up, and then time elapsed, and then it says the earth was dry. Well, notice it says, and if you have the King James, it says the face of the earth. So in verse 13, the surface ground was dried, but still there's some mud out there, there's some soft spots. And then in verse 14, the entire earth was dry. And then God speaks to Noah after a year of silence, saying, "Go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons' wives with you, and bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and animals and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may breed abundantly on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth." So he says that to Noah and his family. He also says that to the animals. Be fruitful, multiply, fill up the earth again. So God is acting here. He's directing Noah. And what does Noah do? He obeys. Verse 18. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. And every beast, every creeping thing, and every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by their families from the ark. Verse 20. Then Noah built an altar. If you can imagine, you're preaching for 100 years, nobody responds. You're building this ark that God told you. You're really not sure what rain is. You're not sure what's going on. But by faith, Noah acted, Hebrews chapter 11. And by faith, he's trusting God. And then this horrific storm comes, and everything outside is obliterated. And for a year, you don't hear from God. And then when everything settles down, the ark lands, the land dries up. And then what does Noah do? As soon as he gets off the ark, he worships God. He builds an altar, and he took of every clean animal. Remember, he took pairs of all the animals, but some of the clean animals, he took extras. And here is the reason why, or at least one of the reasons why, for an offering to God. If you can imagine, these clean animals are domesticated, and Noah is really kind of impressive here. He's getting off the ark, and he's going to deliberately kill some of the animals that were domesticated, or at least prone to be, and it's an act of worship, it's an act of faith, it's an act of sacrifice. And if you think about, the wild animals are gone, and they're going to start breeding and filling up the earth. The ones that stayed with Noah, he's going to kill a bunch of them. Why? To just give thanks to God, to worship God, to recognize you saved my family, and I am in your debt. And so he builds this altar in verse 20. And of every clean bird, every clean animal, he offered burnt offerings on the altar. And then this is kind of what I want to focus on here. The fact this is the start of the Noahic covenant. We looked a little bit about it at it last week in chapter 9. But check out verse 21. The Lord was satisfied. He smelled the soothing aroma, and the Lord said to himself, "I will never again curse the ground on account of man." That's not a reference to the flood. That's a reference to Genesis chapter 3, verse 17. Remember? When Adam and Eve sinned, God cursed the ground. It used to provide abundance for Adam and Eve, and now God says you're going to have to work for it. Why? Because the ground is cursed. We see that curse is continued in Romans chapter 8. It's still here. You still have to work for your bread. And God is going to reverse that curse at some point in the future, the 1,000-year kingdom, but it's not yet. But he says, I won't add an additional curse, verse 21. on account of man, for the intent of man's heart is evil from his youth. And I will never again, here's another thing, I will never again destroy every living thing as I have done. Noah and his family obviously being the exception. Whatever's on the ark, he's saved. And that's a picture, although not a real clear one. But in the future, when God destroys the earth in judgment, he's not going to destroy every living thing. Because if you have a relationship with Jesus Christ, for example, you're going to be spared from that judgment. And then verse 22, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. So we've got doomsdayers who are saying the sky is falling, the world's coming to an end, and if we don't act, Al said by 2016, that's too late. But if we don't act really serious, really quick, the world is coming to an end. God says just the opposite. Seed time and harvest. So there's going to be food. The reason we're having trouble right now, and I don't deny the fact that there are thousands and thousands of people starving, it's not a lack of supply. It's greedy people shutting off distribution. The earth is producing tons and tons of food. In fact, more than we need. What happens are greedy people get in the way of getting that food to the people who need it. So food is going to continue. And guess what? Cold and heat will continue. In fact, we have some examples here of cold and heat, because summer and winter, so that's cold and heat. Day and night, that's cold and heat. It gives relief. If you were, if you were just living in a hot sun all day long and there was no nighttime to bring relief, that would be very difficult to live. God says, I promise, I'm not going to curse the ground again. I'm not going to destroy the entire human race again. And oh, by the way, as long as the earth remains, you're going to have seasons of food and harvest and planting and cultivating. You're going to have day and night. You're going to have cold and you're going to have heat and you're going to have summer and you're going to have winter. Now, people look around and say, well, our forests are on fire and we have a drought and all that stuff. That is our experience right now. But if you live in Texas, you live in Florida, drought isn't their problem, right? So God is promising, I will never again destroy the world. I'll never again, with water, and I will never again destroy the entire human race. And oh, by the way, you can count on it. The seasons will continue. Heat and cold will continue. Summer and winter will continue. Now, we have to ask ourselves, who are we going to believe? Are we going to believe scientists who are at least motivated by power and money and other things, and they've got a track record of being wrong over and over and over? Or are we going to believe God? And I don't intend that to be a rhetorical question. Who are you going to believe? The world system wants you to be afraid. Some mysterious illness is going to kill everybody, or the world is going to get so hot that we can't survive anymore. We're going to be drowned by the oceans overcoming us. And God said, no, that ain't going to happen. I think I'm going to believe God. And I want you, one of the things I've been trying to encourage you in this study in Genesis, children of God should walk by faith and not fear. God has your back. And just like the planet belongs to him and he will save it, you belong to him and he will save you. So this is an ancient promise, but it has relevance for today and significance. On Earth Day 2011, the National Association of Scholars, composed mostly of conservative-leaning academics at the time, sound the alarm of the proliferation of sustainable development classes in colleges. And it would be okay if sustainable development meant, we're going to recycle aluminum and we want clean air and water. That's cool. That's not what these people are talking about, sustainable development. What they want is a top-down control, removing the free market system and replacing it with globalism. They've been at it for a long time, and it's gaining speed. This guy, Peter Wood, he was the president of the National Academy of Science. So this isn't some right-wing conspiratorial wacko dude. He's a scientist. And he said sustainability sounds like a call for recycling and clean water, but its proponents are much more ambitious. For them, a sustainable society is one that replaces the market economy with top-down regulation. They present students a frightening story in which the earth is on the brink of disaster and immediate action is needed. This is a tactic aimed at silencing critics, shutting down debate, and mobilizing students who never get the opportunity to hear opposing views. That was 11 years ago. Our colleges are cranking out people, students that are concerned about the creation and the environment and the climate, but they never get to hear the other side. Why? Because the other side is censored. Just like so many political opinions and religious opinions and scientific opinions, if it doesn't toe the mark of the mainstream media, you're kicked off the social media, you're kicked off. In fact, I just saw today, Twitter, General Motors is withdrawing their ads for Elon Musk's Twitter now because why? He is insisting on practicing the First Amendment and letting all people come on there who pay $8 a month or something, and they can share their views. And General Motors says, we don't want that. We want one side told and one side only. I have a book up here, and I don't want to just give a book report, but I want to share with you, this was written by Fred Singer back in the 90s, and then just 2021, he updated it just before he died, as a matter of fact. But Fred Singer, his resume, he has been a pioneer in many ways. As an academic scientist in the 50s, he published the first studies on subatomic particles trapped in the Earth's magnetic field. He was the pioneer. He's the first guy. Radiation belts later discovered by physicist James Van Allen, showing that Singer was correct. Also, in challenging the findings of other scientists, he was the first to make the correct calculations for using atomic clocks in orbit. We talked about that when we were talking about God creating the stars and starlight and time. Well, he's the first guy to come up with this atomic clock thing, which verifies Einstein's general theory of motion affects time, and distance affects time. He further designed satellites and instrumentation for remote sensing of the atmosphere, accomplishments for which he received a White House presidential commendation. Switching careers in 1960s, he established and served as first director of the U.S. Weather Satellite Service, which is now NOAA, N-O-A-A. His efforts are recognized by the U.S. Department of Commerce with a gold medal award. Returning to university life in the 70s, Fred Singer's concern was the environment led him to investigate the effects of human activities on the atmosphere. That's what's going on, the debate here. 1971, he calculated that population growth, together with increased rice growing and cattle raising, would cause a substantial upward trend of methane, an important greenhouse gas. He also predicted that methane, once it reached the stratosphere, would be transformed into water vapor, leading to a possible depletion of stratospheric ozone. Both of those have been confirmed by multiple studies since. My point is, this guy is not a wacko. He is recognized as a leader in satellite atmospheric stuff, and he has some things to say about climate change. One of them is he explores the inaccuracies in this book, a historical climate data, the limitations on and failures of climate models, et cetera, et cetera. It is one thing to impose drastic measures and harsh economic penalties when an environmental problem is clear-cut and severe. It is quite another to do so when the environmental problem is largely hypothetical and not substantiated by careful observations. An expert in the field says the science does not prove global warming, or at least that it's not caused by humans. Until we do, it would be a reckless breach of trust to put in force hasty policies that create real personal and economic hardships for most of the world's population. Europe is going to freeze to death this winter. The pipeline has been exploded. They've cut down on coal imports. Why? To protect the environment. Nuclear power is not an option for them anymore, and they are facing a crisis. Some of the governments in Europe right now are telling their people, go out and chop down trees so you can stay warm this winter. Is that a good thing for the environment? Well, so this is Professor Singer. As I mentioned, he started the NOAA. By the way, down at the bottom there, he opposed both the IPCC, remember the International Panel on Climate Change? He came out with a bunch of recommendations, and the Kyoto Protocols. One of the good things, like him or hate him, Trump got us out of the Kyoto Protocols and the Paris Treaty. It was a good thing. Why? Because China ain't going to obey them anyway. And America will end up slitting our own throat and make no improvement on the climate. You might have heard about ClimateGate. Intercepted emails documenting leading scientists conspired to squelch debate. Boy, could that ever happen? Yeah, it happens with regularity. These guys outstanding in their fields want to present a different viewpoint, and these other scientists back and forth are colluding on their emails that they were suppressing evidence. And when ClimateGate came out, these emails were exposed, what happened? The media attacked these people, not the ones who were conspiring to hide evidence. They attacked these people as wackos. This guy was actually in Obama's administration, the circle down at the bottom, Undersecretary for Science, U.S. Department of Energy. He has written a book called Unsettled, and he says the climate debate is not over. It's not settled science. They're lying to us. William Happer, professor of physics at Princeton, a longtime member of JASON, which provides independent advice to the U.S. government, testified in front of Congress numerous times. He's saying the same thing. The jury is still out, and we need to share alternative viewpoints to get the science to do its job. He disdains credulous support of schemes to reduce carbon footprints and the funding of even more computer centers to predict global warming. He asserts it is important to distinguish between what the climate is actually doing and what computer models predict. The observed response of the climate to more CO2 is not in good agreement with model predictions. These guys go so far to say CO2 is actually good for the environment. Now, who would say such a thing? Anybody who knows anything about plants. They take in CO2 and they give us oxygen. We take in oxygen, we give them CO2. And guess what? The world is greener now than at any time since the Garden of Eden. Well, at least the flood. So, as this guy here, they are manipulating the temperatures and the data. This is an actual study from 1996, ocean sediment studies. So the farther you go to the right, it's older. So that's not 3,000 years into the future, that's 3,000 years back as they look at this ocean sediment. And it's actually warmer in the old days. These studies, they all start with the decade of the 1960s, and they say, well, look, you idiot. You could just look at this and see it's getting warmer. What they haven't shown you is pre-1960. Pre-1960, look how hot it was. In the 1930s, it was off the chart. You might have remembered studying about the Dust Bowl. Look at these images here. Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma. That's after Black Sunday. It was a particularly difficult dust storm came through April 14th, 35. That was during the hottest time ever recorded in the United States. The modern climate alarmists leave that out. They start their clock at 1960, and they say, well, look how it's getting so warm, and we better do something dramatic. Before 1960, it was a heck of a lot hotter. This is, I mentioned the greening. This is actual satellite image from 2016 by NASA. Again, not a right-wing conspiracy. And what they find, from 1/4 to 1/2 of Earth's vegetated lands has shown significant greening over the last 35 years, largely due to rising levels of CO2. God is warming our universe, perhaps, our planet, but that's not a bad thing. Plants are thriving. We have more forests now. I know this is hard for you to believe because we're burning ours down every year. There are more forests on the earth now than at any time in human history. CO2, they call it fertilization, greening of the earth. The LAI is leaf area imaging. So they can take a picture, and you can see, except for the Sahara in northern Africa and Saudi Arabia and Greenland, which is all ice, everything else is green. That's a good thing. But you don't hear this on the news. Oh, CO2 is going to kill us all. That's pretty good for your gardens. It's pretty good for your plants. It's pretty good for living things. We're constantly cajoled to follow the science. The truth is that global alarmists are selective in their support for science and scientists. They have suppressed alternative views from highly respected scientists. This is a pattern. Globalists want us to believe mandated vaccines are saving millions of lives, even though today, a year after emergency authorization of the COVID shots, they still have not been clinically proven to do what they claimed they would. It is the same with the Green New Deal. There is a mountain of evidence showing that CO2 is not the boogeyman that make it out to be, but rather than allowing review, they mock and attack any other viewpoint. You need to do your homework. And we need to decide, are we going to trust God and His Word, or are we going to cave in to the alarmists who say the sky is falling and we need to be afraid of everything? We need to be afraid of each other because everybody knows we're all racist and hate each other, right? We need to be afraid of diseases. We need to be afraid of this, afraid of that. No, we don't. We need to walk by faith and trust God and His Word. CO2 has not caused temperatures or sea levels to rise beyond historical rates. It just has not happened. Global warming over the past 130 years is 0.9 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's not caused by you driving your car. It's caused by oceans warming up. And that happens. Sometimes they cool, sometimes they warm up. Severe storms have not increased in frequency or intensity since 1970, neither have heat waves or droughts. Does not happen. Global change is not harming coral reefs. Any increases in CO2 concentrations across huge time spans haven't preceded rising temperatures. They have followed them by about 600 and 800 years. It's measurable, observable science. CO2 goes up after the warming. It doesn't cause the warming. Doomsday or climate scientists have hidden their raw temperature data and undermined the peer review system to squelch debate. It's deliberate. There's a whole bunch of unelected people meeting every year to plan the demise of the Western civilization. And that's not I'm not saying the sky is falling. I'm saying we could see what's going on, and we know their track record, and we need to oppose it and expose it. So who are you going to believe? While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, shall not cease. That's a promise from God. The one who made the universe, by the way, and the one who died for you, he's telling us, trust me. The day will come when the Lord returns like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat. The elements, the basic building blocks of everything, will be destroyed with intense heat. And the earth and all its works will be burned up. Since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, what sort of people ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be destroyed by burning, not by water, by burning. What kind of person should you be? Beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers to abstain from fleshly lusts. Notice this says, while the earth remains. The earth is not eternal. God is going to destroy it. He's not going to destroy it by you driving your cars. He's going to destroy it with intense burning heat when he says it's time. Keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, on account of your good deeds, as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation. God has your back. Check this out. If God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into Tartarus and committed them to pits of darkness, reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, and if he rescued righteous Lot, oppressed by the sensual conduct of unprincipled men, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from temptation and to keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment. God knows who belongs to him, and he will save you and protect you. If he chooses to allow you to die some horrible death that brings him glory, that's his call. We were just talking about martyrs, Christians who are doing nothing but believing in God and sharing the gospel. They're tortured and killed. The devil could not do that unless God allowed it. He's going to hold the murderers accountable, but somehow the death of his servants frequently bring him glory. And their testimony will provide spiritual fruit down the road. But God knows who belongs to him. God knows who's killing his children. God knows who's deceiving the world. And we know that the devil is the father of lies, right? So we have to decide for ourselves, for our children. I encourage you to share the truth, get informed, share the truth with your children, with your grandchildren, with their teachers, with anybody you can or rub shoulders with. Yeah, the world is going to be destroyed, but it's not going to happen Tuesday. It's not going to happen because of humans participating in life. It's going to happen because of evil that is rampant. It's going to happen because God says enough, and he's going to come and establish his kingdom, and he's going to destroy all the evil. And he can tell the difference between Noah and the unrighteous. He can tell the difference between Lot and the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. He can tell the difference between you and the lost people around us. It's our job to walk by faith and to share the truth with those who are lost, because they're going to burn up if they don't come to faith in Christ. Well, thanks. I encourage you Don't be fearful. Right now, the world needs a courageous church. Committed, vocal, verbal, living a life in front of the unbelievers that is godly, so they will ask you for a hope, the reason for your hope. They'll ask you for your viewpoints on stuff, and then share God's word and share the truth. So let's close with a song, and thank you.